Okay, and again, now we're talking about stuff outside of this computer. So usually we're connecting to a switch. Even if we're wireless to a wireless access point, and it's then connecting to a switch. What's a switch? A switch is basically a traffic cop where all of the wired connections come together to be distributed. So all the data that we're sending from our computer and everybody else's computer on that network are all going through that device. And not all switches are created equal. A lot of switches, probably a majority of the switches that are currently installed, are 100 megabit. Or they may have a couple of gigabit ports, which means that even if you have a gigabit network card here, 1,000 megabits per second, you can only transmit your data at 100 megabits. Okay? If that's the case, there's nothing you can do here. You've got that's your transfer speed. Okay? Also, in a lot of cases, there are companies that have VoIP, where they're sending voice and data over the same network. Well, here's the problem. If I go to a website and my website loads slowly, it still loads. I still got a website. If I'm doing voice communication over the same network and we start losing data there because of speed, we drop the call. We cannot hear the person. There's a huge difference between those two. And so what we do is, if we have the ability, it's called a managed switch, we tell the switch to treat voice data with a higher priority than the other type of data, or traffic. Which means the web person may actually suffer a bit if there's a lot of voice data going on. But at least the phone calls, you can actually hear them. If any of us used any VoIP-based systems or talked to somebody who was back a few years ago, the quality was horrible.
Tin cans.
Tin cans. Internet-based tin cans, which makes it even worse. So nowadays, it does not cost a lot to actually get full gigabit-based switches. So everybody can talk gigabit. Okay? And it's also does not cost a heck of a lot more to make them so that they're manageable. So that someone can actually say, we want this data to go this way, this data to go that way. Okay. Internet connection. Now we're talking about the outside world. How many think a T1 line is really, really fast? Okay. Years ago, we were told, somebody had a T1 line, was like, wow, blazing speed. A T1 line is maximum 1.4 megabits per second.
1.5.
1.5.
Oh, don't forget it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. 1.54 megabits per second. Now, if you remember here, the old network cards you can't buy anymore were 10 megabits per second. In most cases, we're talking 100 or 1,000 megabits per second internally. So the second that we go out with a T1 line, we are roughly going to about 1.5% of what a traditional network connection is. And everybody's going out. So everyone within your facility who's going out or pulling data in from the internet, they're all using that same pipe. So not only is it 1.5%, but it also has to deal with everybody. So we just went to a country road with a lot of traffic.
So this is when you have half your employees watching YouTube.
Well, you hope that they're all watching at least the same movie. Because then you can cache. But yeah, streaming media. As soon as people start pulling in a lot of data, they're pulling it off that one pipeline. All right? And DSL is how?
DSL can range anywhere from 128K, so 0.128, up to new versions of DSL, you can get up to 20 or faster. But generally speaking, your traditional house DSL, anywhere from about 768K, half of a T1, up to about 4 T1s, 6 megabit.
Does DSL in general still make that great big sucking noise?
No, that was a modem. No, modems have thankfully mostly gone away. You're screeching every time you do a dial-up to AOL. No, modems don't, or DSL does not.
If you're sharing your phone line with your DSL line and you happen to listen in, yes.
Cat 4, Cat 5. Everything stops. That depends on that, right? In between all of this stuff.
That's okay. That's the quality of cable. That's the quality of the actual cable that you're connecting with.
Cat 5's a new standard.
No, Cat 6 is.
Cat 6 is?
Yep.
It's not even necessarily standard.
But if you move into a building that was built in, say, 1995, you know that you have Cat 4 back behind the walls, right?
No, there's probably either Cat 3 or Cat 5. Cat 4 isn't used very much.
Yeah, it wasn't back then.
No. Your traditional phone cable, like the regular thing on your old phone, that's not even a Cat rating. Category 3 is you have a white twist on the cable on the inside. Category 5, the twist got a little bit tighter on the inside.
You're showing off now.
5E was a little bit better. And 6 is not necessarily even the fastest. The logical progression is 6 is bigger than 5, so 6 is better. It is extremely easy to screw up a Cat 6 installation, and it will be slower than the more tolerant Cat 5e installations.
Okay, so if we had a building that was built in, say, like 1995, what do I guess is behind
It
the
was
wall?
probably Cat 5 and not 5e.
Okay.
When you were talking about DSL, what did you say the maximum speed on our website?
Your traditional DSL, as marketed as DSL, was anywhere from, generally speaking, like half a T1, so 768K, up to about 6 meg. And that was very dependent on how far you were away from your telephone company's central office. The maximum range, I think, was 18,000 feet away, and that was as the wire goes. And at around 18,000 feet, you were lucky to pull a 768K signal reliably. To get the 6 meg signal, you have to be about 3,000 or less, 2,000 or less. And when I said the 20 meg for DSL, it's actually not called DSL. It's called UVerse at that point. UVerse is technically a very new version of DSL, but it runs significantly faster.
On a good day.
What's its speed?
I'll give you a personal experience. We are 1 mile from downtown Akron, where AT&T's office is. We should be able to get a 7 meg to 12 connection, and they just degraded us, so our max is 6, but we actually get 2 to 3.
The problem
And
with
that
me
is my experience with UVerse.
The-
And not only that, when they degraded our account, they took us off of the special offer, and it went from $30 to $120 a month.
So basically, they lowered your service and raised the price.
You got it.
Oh man, I got to remember that phone.
But wait, I have to tell you that AT&T tried to pull that on us because they're DSL. We were on that 18,000 foot thing when we moved out to Westlake, and AT&T tried pulling that. Just hang out there. We'll have that UVerse there shortly. Blah 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 blah, and then WOW walked in the door. And they said, let's talk to the building owner, we'll have you up in a week. And they consistently almost double the speed that they're supposed to give us at a fraction of the cost of viewers.
A lot of that depends on the infrastructure.
That's wow.
Like your case with downtown Akron, the biggest problem with downtown Akron, it's been there for hundreds of years. So now you've got this 100-year-old copper line that's pretty much everywhere, and unless you know they've replaced that stuff with brand new fiber optic, you're running off of the same copper lines that our grandparents used. So there's only so much you can do with that. All it takes is one little chipmunk eating the outer casing and water getting in there, and damage that wire permanently.
I think viewers, I think for the most part, they sent the wiring and stuff out to residential areas to work over their existing systems.
Well,
it's new for the businesses, and I think it really sucks for the businesses.
UVerse's model was fiber up to a neighborhood, and then they used the existing copper past that. So it was copper for the last mile, was the typical sales term you hear with it. I actually have UVerse at home, and I watched them put the fiber optic box 5 houses down, and I kept calling AT&T basically every day when I saw the line trucks leave. Do I have it yet? Do I have it yet? Because I knew I was going to have a good installation because everything was brand new up to 5 houses away. So it really depends on the
It works well
infrastructure.
for you because you're so close.
Exactly.
Right.
And everything was brand new for that.
So you gave the range for the DSL. What's the range for the
UVerse, I think the biggest package you can get is a 20 meg down with a 3.5 or 4.5 up.
They had two. One was up to 12 megs, but they guarantee 6, and the other was up to 6, and they guarantee 3.
Yeah, and this is one where your mileage will vary.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Dependent upon, and one service may be wonderful, like AT&T UVerse is wonderful for him, not so much for you, and
Because of the location.
Exactly, location, location, location.
Well, like Time Warner, they tell you that no matter what you do, it's max 1 meg up.
That's a cap on that they've been placed on their
Right.
end.
That's
They have
Theoretically,
placed on
equipment-
their end, or does it live on my machine?
No, that's a cap that they impose.
Right, they throttle it themselves,
Okay, so they suck.
Again.
but not as quickly.
Pay for more.
Actually, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
You can
The
pay for
issue
more.
with Time Warner, in this area, if you come up on Time Warner under a table, you're on the original Roadrunner installations.
Yep.
Very old technology.
20 years ago.
Very susceptible to failure, but they offer business class fiber optic connection. Pay for it, but you
Yep.
have to not have the speakers.
My home cable, I got random service up to 15. It's random. Usually it's about 3 or 5.
Yeah.
3 or 5 up?
Typically it's 3 to 5, and occasionally it'll be 15 or 20.
Yeah, here's the challenge, and it's kind of similar when we're talking about the wireless, is there are a number of vendors that are going to be either accessible or not accessible, each with their own brand of technology to your facility, whether it be business or home. And you're going to have to make some decisions, do a little bit of research as far as what they're offering and the cost. And then it's going to be up to you. Now you can, again, bring in someone who can help you make that decision. And you can also ask people nearby. Ask businesses that are near you, because they're in the same boat you are. What are they using? How good of it or bad an experience are they having? Because if you ask somebody who's across town and they say, oh yeah, we've got ABC and it's fast as lightning, the exact opposite may be true for you.
Doing well, walked in the door, and they said, well, we need to run a line to your building. Who else do you have nearby?
Yeah.
And I just went walking down, and I say, does your DSL suck? Does your DSL suck? And it was yes, 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 and we all signed up.
And if you can do that at around 2:30 in the morning, that's where you'll get the best responses from your neighbors. Just knock loudly, yell, does your DSL suck? And then run. Especially on Halloween.
Favorite website for checking the speed?
Speedtest.net.
Yeah.
That seems to work out pretty good. And typically what you do is you take your first speed test and ignore it and run it again. Wait a little bit, run it again, and then take the average. You don't, if anyone is taking any statistics classes, don't take any particular point. Look for the trending. So if you consistently, like if you have a 6 meg DSL line and you're getting consistently 5.5, you're good. If you get a 5.5 and then a 1 and then a 5.5, okay, maybe something just happened on that one. Test it again. Get the average for whatever you're trying to test.
So speedtest.net, and this actually, we talk about this a little bit later. Don't wait for running this until you're slow, because then you don't know what the normal is. You don't have a baseline. So, and the one thing I want to show is this is the website. You'll notice there's a whole bunch of other things. No, begin test. These are all advertisements. These are all things that will load on your system to tell you how wonderful their services are. Begin test.
And we'll slow it down.
Yeah. So if we just say begin test, it'll first select a site, and it'll first just say how long does it take for me to ping, meaning verify that something exists.
Why wouldn't it pick the closest site to you?
Because
It might
it's,
not be the fastest.
right.
You might be faster for us to talk to someone in Reno versus Detroit, just depending on how the internet's flowing that day.
Yep. And then it'll test uploading, and it'll test, or excuse me, it'll test downloading and then uploading speed. So, like Kevin says, you run this a few times, you write down the number, you ignore the first time, and you write down some of the numbers, 132 milliseconds, 5.12 megabits per second. For downloading, uploading is 0.63 megabits per second. And then, if you find a time where the internet's running really slow, run this again then, and see whether or not there's a big delta. If there isn't, but you ran when you ran the test now, it was fine, but when it was slow, your application was slow, it ran the same speed, it's something else.
Can't you get your internet provider to provide some kind of log that tracks that, shows you what your performance has been like the last 30 days or whatever?
The problem is,
Depends.
and it depends, the quality of their information, because their goal is to basically keep you from requesting service. I'm sorry, excuse me, their goal is to make you happy. Not necessarily satisfied, just happy. And also, in some cases, they may give you a number that's really misleading. It's a metric number that they use to measure their little subsection of the pipe.
If they talk really fast, they're lying.
That's not always true. So,
There is a site called DSL Reports.
yeah.
Where you can buy tool points and they'll monitor your line and they'll give you a graph and you can see it went out this time.
Mhm.
That's independent if you really want
Yep.
to check it.
DSLreports.com. Yeah, and that site also did pretty good, and I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've gone to that site, but they also did a pretty good job of giving some feedback on the various vendors
One
in
thing
your
that was
area.
interesting was they had their server farm go off and they were down for a week and a half.
Did they have a report on that?
Yeah, they had a little page on it. I mean, it was
Okay.
like
Yeah.
DSL Reports.
DSLreports.com. Cool. Okay, let's keep going on this.
Kevin, did you say to throw the first one out as a potential outlier, or just make sure you average it in? Why would it be in a...
It's like the
Kind of
first
curious.
pancake.
There's a lot of, there could be caching, buffering, there could be a lot of other external factors that don't necessarily play in for the subsequent tests.
Well, what about a week later then? Same thing?
Yeah, I mean, for
In any...
throughout the first one on your test for that session. So
Okay,
if you were gonna
yeah.
do 5 tests,
Yeah.
you might wanna just
Yeah,
skip
I
out
can
the
see the
first
caching
one.
issue.
But a
That's-
week
I think-
later,
Okay.
you do the same
Same
thing,
thing.
take 5, skip the
Yeah, you have
first.
to do the
Yep.
same thing. Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. So hopefully we've talked a little bit about the components that are involved here. But what we haven't talked about is, okay, why, we still haven't really talked about why is it slow. Again, all of these can build up queues, or all of these elements can be a bottleneck. So one of the key things you want to try to do is to determine which of these resources is being overused or overcommitted. Here's where it gets to be fun. So if, for example, you're testing the ISP speed and you see significant down, it's just not that fast as it was earlier, that could be the bottleneck. Okay? This is where we get geeky, okay? And unfortunately, part of the thing with the geeky is that here's where you can start really mucking up your life, okay? We talked about speedtest.net. That's a great test, and you can run that as much as you want to, as often as you want to, all that good fun stuff. Task Manager disk cleanup and safe mode, those are all things to look specifically at your computer. Okay? The Task Manager, what that does, and we've probably all seen this. If I can focus that a little bit more. Oh, that's a little better. What Task Manager does is it really tells you what is the computer doing at this point in time. Because if we've got bottlenecks, some of these activities must be causing the bottleneck on the computer. So to go over this relatively from the left, how many people have played with this at all? Okay, cool. The rest of you are smart.
How many own a PC?
There you go. This will tell you the applications that are running, which means for the most part these are things that actually have screens or some kind of presence that you can see and look at. And sometimes you'll see things like why it's not, not responding or something along those lines. But this gives a list. And here's where you can highlight and you can end them, which is the most common activity for this particular portion of the screen. But then in addition to that, we have, here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 applications that are running.
Here's where I get into trouble.
Yep. I actually have, I'm going to show,
107.
You got me beat.
I have 107, and I just said show them from all users.
107.
Yep. I have 107 actual processes. Some of those processes, like this one called Outlook, that has to do with, wait for it, Outlook. So there's a direct correlation. But some of them, DWM, search index, we don't know necessarily what those processes are doing. But what this shows us is how much memory is being used by it. Remember the RAM? And also how much the brain is actually working on it at any one point in time, the CPU. And for the most part, system idle. Meaning it's not the CPU, the brain really isn't working on anything. When that happens a lot, the processor by and large is probably not the bottleneck. I say probably, there's exceptions to this. So my CPU is probably fast enough, I have enough cores and all that kind of fun stuff. Memory, if I click on this, you can see I've got 204 meg, so these are kilobytes, so it's 205 megabytes of data, or memory that's used, 145, and this goes down all the way down. Yeah, so system idle is 24K. 1000K equals 1 meg. And I think I've got 2 gig of RAM on this system. So, well, what would make sense then is for me to highlight the ones that are using a lot of memory and just click end process. Because that'll clean it up in a really bad way. Because a lot of these are necessary for the programs to run. So for example, iExplore.exe, that's Internet Explorer. That's what's keeping the browser pages open. Explorer, that's the thing that actually makes sure that all the icons are on the desktops and the menus and all that kind of fun stuff. SVC host is kind of a generic service that's running, or a generic program that's running that takes care of sharing resources and all that good fun stuff. So we need to know. So we can't just go and, that's where Google is your friend. So you can go in and essentially, Bing. Bing is your friend.
No, Bing.
Microsoft sponsoring the Lunchinar. Bing's your friend. So, there goes next month's funding.
But you see, if you ask that question in Bing, it will just come back to you and ask you another question.
There you go. So what you can do is you can look up these services. or these particular process names. So you can look up, you know, communicators, so you can find out it's actually the Microsoft link going on. And that'll give you an idea. But what you want to look for is not so much the little guys, but you want to look for these big puppies that are taking up a lot of memory. Yes, sir?
I've done what you suggest, but it's a very time-consuming process because there are about 70 of them. So my question is there something that says what you should have, which are the important ones? In other words, which ones, is there a list of these 40, just don't kill them no matter what because they're good? That would be helpful to me. And then I'd say, okay, so somebody has that list?
There are probably several lists like that, and all of them are different. Your best bet, if you really wanted to, first of all, the more you get into this, the more into our world you're in, okay? So either you've become a serious hobbyist or a masochist. And sometimes there's not much difference between the two. So what you want to do is you want to take a look at it. The other thing you can do is you can actually put your computer in safe mode and take a look at the process.
See what's running there.
Those are the things you don't want to eliminate.
That's the absolute core.
Right. Okay?
And then you have your own list and that is that.
Yep. But the problem is, since each machine can be running a different version of browser, of antivirus, of whatever, every vendor brings their own list of processes to the table. So, in Microsoft Windows, actually Vista and 7 as well, there's also the Resource Monitor, which can actually be accessed from the Task Manager. This will give a much more thorough view of all that's going on. You want to look for where the resource is going. Oh, one other thing I want to show on the Task Manager, and unfortunately we're running out of time here, is I can also take a look at performance. Performance gives me an idea of CPU usage. So it gives me this running chart, and obviously the high spikes means that the CPU is doing a lot. And doing a lot momentarily, that's fine. It's supposed to be working for us. But if it's constantly up here, now we might have an issue. Similarly, we have our memory available and free. Now, one of the things that's going on here is you'll notice the free memory. Free memory isn't necessarily a bad thing because it should be using the memory that's available. So, any other thoughts to add on that?
Other than we constantly get alerts that you're running low on memory on your laptop.
Yeah, and it says some of your processes may be unavailable for a few minutes while we correct this.
Right, because what Windows will try to do is it will try to, because you have the caching that we use the disk, virtual memory and all that sort of fun stuff, there are some things that it can try to do automatically to try to clean it up.
So should you keep your caching at 10%? Where should you keep your caching if you're not running heavily graphics intensive stuff?
It's very dependent on the system is what you're doing with it. I mean, years ago there was the general rule of page file twice as much memory as you had in the computer. Well, that doesn't make any sense anymore. You know, when you've got a computer with 16 gig of memory, to devote 32 gig of memory to page is ridiculous. It's a waste. By and large, you should just let Windows do its thing. And especially with Windows 8. Windows 8 memory management is absolutely wonderful compared to what we had to put up with Windows 95, Windows 98, the first generations or releases of Windows XP. Let Windows do its thing. There are very few instances where you actually need to go in there and tweak this stuff to squeeze out minuscule amounts of performance. So yeah, just let Windows do its thing.
And here's the other thing, is that look at this while it's running okay. Write down some of these numbers. And then when it starts getting slow, then look at what the difference is in those numbers.
Are there some things that you can stop from starting up automatically until you need them?
Yeah, you've got to be careful on that one too, because there may be services that you really need, like antivirus services or the like, that you say, hey, I'll let you know when I need them.
But like Acrobat and stuff like that, Skype, stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Programs that you're not using, a lot of them will load automatically down in the trays and all that fun stuff. Yeah, close them if you're not using them. and then just bring them up when you need them.
But you can go in and tell them not to start up, just go into.
Yeah, almost all of them have some kind of startup or options screen that you can specify whether or not to start up. Okay. Yeah.
XT, do service packs correct any of the memory allocation, or is that not corrected until later versions? Professional.
XP?
XT professional.
Yeah, it gets better, but not by much. Really, it's Vista when they started taking memory management seriously, especially in terms of like searching and all that kind of fun stuff. And really 7 is where it sang. And 8, much more so.
Now, there you're earning your money.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Again, to summarize, we've got to wrap up. First of all, what's normal? If you don't know what it normally is, whether it be your internet speed or how much memory you have available or anything along those lines, then how do you know where the bottleneck has suddenly risen? Because the bottleneck has appeared from somewhere. So you want to take a look at that. The other thing is kind of gets into what you were talking about, junk. You know, do you really need 6 toolbars on your web browser? You know, the answer is no. Similarly, screensavers, streaming media, a real killer is multiple antivirus programs. There's a lot of people who will have more than one, and the problem is that program A thinks program B is a virus, program B thinks program A is a virus. They do not play well together.
Since you don't have CRTs anymore, there's absolutely no need for any kind of screensaver whatsoever. Am I incorrect?
You are incorrect.
Okay.
LCDs can still, and LEDs can still have burn-in issues.
Really?
It's not the same burn-in, but the end result, like technically it's not the same thing happening, but the end result is you have something that's stuck on the screen permanently.
Yeah.
And I have done that playing way too many hours of World of Warcraft on an LCD monitor.
Do you recommend CCleaner?
It's not a bad utility. Again, it's how aggressive do you want to be with it. Do you want it to go in there and purge absolutely everything you can? You might end up with some other issues, but just on a real quick, it's not going to hurt.
There are a number of tools and utilities out there, like CCleaner, and actually just a disk cleanup utility in Windows that will get rid of some of the flotsam and jetsam you have. Your mileage will vary. Some are good, some not so good.
Do you have any word of caution about this cleanup utility? I saw that on people's slide.
The issue with the disk cleanup utility is that in some cases it will get rid of your memorized data. So depending upon how aggressive you are, like if you go into internet options and clean up all the files, it may not remember your remembered passwords, all that kind of fun stuff.
Well, isn't that the object?
It depends on what you want.
Yeah.
Some people, they want all that stuff gone every time they close Internet Explorer. Some people, it's rather inconvenient to always type in, you know, the same web portal they log into 5 times a day. Just have it remember the password for me already.
Well, it also wipes out the last 6 spreadsheets you wrote on the last 6 Word documents.
Yeah, they can absolutely do that.
Again, it's really how aggressive do you want to be?
And you can tweak them.
If running Windows 7 and you're running just standard Office products, getting on the internet, buying a new computer, what amount of RAM should you be getting? And in going to Windows 8, does that increase?
Actually, it decreases.
Okay.
Windows 8 is better on the memory than Windows 7 is. For a 64-bit, absolutely minimum is 4 gig. Yeah, and if you can get more than 4 gig, that's better.
Somewhere between 4 and 8 is usually the happy spot. 8 people, or 8 gig, people with more demands, like if you were doing like video editing,
right,
image editing, a lot of spreadsheets open, email, you want to start leaning more towards the 6, 8. With general home use, 4, 6.
Okay, cool. And we've got to wrap up because we're running out of time. If there's any more questions, we'll be sticking around a little bit, all that kind of fun stuff. So, also, if anyone is interested, if you have any questions, shoot us an email. You know, and more than happy to give you some additional specific advice for you or anything along those lines. Always happy to help on that.